Assalamu alaikum students, this is Dr. Haseeb and today we are going to start motor nervous system. So by the end of today's session, inshallah, you will be able to explain the functions of motor cortex, especially the primary motor cortex, premotor cortex and the supplementary motor cortex. What are the functions of each areas? Then we will discuss the pyramidal tracts followed by the extrapyramidal tracts focusing on the reticulospinal and vestibulospinal pathway. So these are the learning outcomes for today's session. So let's start. You must have seen this figure before. You can see the lateral surface of the left cerebral hemisphere. Why we can say this is the left cerebral hemisphere? Because you can see the temporal lobe is pointing anteriorly. So this is the temporal lobe and this is pointing towards the anterior end. This means this is the anterior portion and this is the occipital lobe. So we can determine the side with the help of this temporal lobe. And this is the lateral view of the left cerebral hemisphere. And you can see some portion of the medial surface of the opposite cerebral hemisphere. So as you can see different numbers placed on the surface of the cerebral cortex. And these are known as the Brodmann's areas. And the German scientist Corbinian Brodmann was responsible, and he was the one who classified whole of the surface of the cerebral cortex and labeled them accordingly. As you can see, this is the central sulcus, centrally placed on the lateral surface of the cerebrum. The part of the cerebrum posterior to the central sulcus is the sensory portion, as you can see by this dotted line, and the portion anterior to this central sulcus is the motor cortex. So we are done with the sensory part. Now we will discuss the motor cortex. You can see the gyrus just anterior to the central sulcus is the primary motor cortex or the Brodmann's area 4. And anterior to this area 4 is area 6, which is the premotor cortex and the supplementary motor cortex. So we will discuss what are the functions of these areas: area 4 primary motor cortex and area 6 premotor and supplementary motor cortex. Remember, the numbers are placed according to the Brodmann's classification, and this classification is on the basis of the histological architecture of the cerebrum. So we will start with Brodmann's area 4, that is the primary motor cortex. So the functions of primary motor cortex includes control of conscious or voluntary discrete movements. And this area is responsible for discrete movements of the upper limbs, especially the hands and fingers. So distal segments of the upper limbs, especially fingers and hands, all these movements are voluntarily controlled by this Brodmann's area 4 or the primary motor cortex. One thing to remember is that point stimulation in these areas will cause contraction of a group of muscles rather than a single muscle contraction. So this means excitation of a single motor cortex neuron. It usually excites a specific movement rather than one specific muscle. So if you stimulate a single point on the surface of the cerebrum, this will cause contraction of a whole group of muscles rather than a single muscle twitch. So all the voluntary movements, the discrete movements of distal segments of limbs, especially upper limb, including hands and fingers, This is the function of primary motor area. Anterior to the primary motor cortex is the premotor cortex. That is why we call it as premotor, before the primary motor cortex. And according to the Brodmann's classification, this is area 6. So unlike the primary motor cortex, this area is responsible for controlling complex movements. Primary motor cortex is responsible for control of voluntary discrete movements, whereas this area, premotor cortex, is responsible for control of complex patterns of movements. Another unique feature of premotor cortex is that this area contains special neurons known as mirror neurons. So why they are called mirror neurons? Because they transform the sensory representation of facts into motor representations. So these neurons are responsible for learning new skills. And how do they learn new skills? By imitation. That is the reason we call them as mirror neurons. So to summarize, area 4, that is primary motor cortex, is responsible for voluntary control of discrete movements, especially movements of distal part of limbs, especially hands and fingers. All these are voluntary discrete movements. On the other hand, premotor cortex is responsible for control of complex movements. And the unique feature is the role of mirror neurons, which are involved in learning new skills by imitation. So we have covered primary motor cortex and premotor cortex. The Brodmann's area 6, the premotor cortex, has also some portion known as the supplementary motor cortex. This is the sub-segment of the same area 6. That is why we call it as the supplementary motor cortex. And this area is responsible for bilateral movements. Remember that all the bilateral movements, for example, movements required for climbing a rope with your hands. So these movements are bilateral. All these movements, all such movements are controlled by the supplementary motor cortex. Other functions of this area 6 supplementary motor cortex is uh, involvement in the attitudinal movements, fixation movements or postural movements, and position movements of head and eyes, the rotation movements of head and eyes. All these are different functions of the supplementary motor area. So these are the three important motor areas of the cerebrum: primary motor cortex, just anterior to the central sulcus. You can see area 4. This is for the control of discrete movements of hands and fingers. Anterior to the primary motor cortex is the premotor cortex, here, area 6, and this area is responsible for control of complex patterns of movement. So discrete movement for primary motor cortex and complex movements for premotor cortex. And supplementary cortex is responsible for control of bilateral movements, especially movements involved in climbing a rope. So your textbook has mentioned names of these two gentlemen, Penfield and American Canadian neurosurgeon. This gentleman was the one who made the concept of homunculus, the motor homunculus of the body. And what is homunculus? This is the topographical representation of the whole body over the surface of the cerebral cortex. And the other gentleman was Rasmussen, another Canadian neurosurgeon, and together they worked and made the concept of motor homunculus. And you can see the motor homunculus. This is the topographical representation of the whole body over the surface of the cerebrum. As you can see, this is the lateral part of the cerebral hemisphere. Now we are moving up from lateral towards the medial side, and this is the medial end. Here you can see. As you can see, the areas of mouth, nose, eyes, lips, all the areas, they are controlled by the lateral part of the cerebral hemisphere. As we go medially, then comes the control of limb movements, especially distal part of the upper limb, the hands and the fingers. If we go more medially, then comes the lower limbs, including the legs and the toes. So this is the motor homunculus. Homunculus is the topographical representation of the whole body, of all the regions of the body over the surface of the cerebral cortex. Again, you can see the lateral surface of the left cerebral hemisphere. You can see all the functions of the facial parts like swallowing, chewing, vocalization, since they are controlled by the lateral portion of the cerebral cortex. You can see they are placed laterally. As we move medially, we can see the movement of thumb, the movement of fingers, the movement of limbs, and towards the medial surface is the control of feet and toes. So this is the motor homunculus. All these areas are represented over the motor cortex, especially the primary motor cortex. Anterior to the primary motor cortex, there are specific areas for speech known as the Broca's area. You can see in the frontal gyrus, inferior frontal gyrus is the speech area, Broca's area. Superior to it is the eye control area. Superior to eye control area is the area for control of head rotation, and then comes the movement of hand. So homunculus is the topographical representation of all the regions of the body over the surface of the cerebral cortex. In the sensory nervous system, we focused on the pathways dorsal column medial lemniscal pathway and anterolateral spinothalamic pathway. Both these tracts were ascending pathways. So ascending tracts are the sensory tracts. Today we are going to discuss the motor tracts or the descending pathways. Since they descend from the cerebrum towards the spinal cord, they are known as descending pathways or the motor pathways. As far as the classification of descending pathways is concerned, we can classify these pathways into two major categories, pyramidal and extrapyramidal. Those descending pathways which form a swelling of tracts over the surface of the medulla oblongata, just like a pyramid, they are classified as pyramidal tracts, and the other name for pyramidal tracts is the corticospinal tract. So this figure shows you the descending motor pathway of corticospinal tract, and inside the corticospinal tract we have two tracts, ventral or the anterior corticospinal tract, and the other one is lateral corticospinal tract, and the collective term is pyramidal tract for these two pathways. They are called descending pathways. Why? Because they descend from the cerebrum. You can see the fibers arising from the primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, and somatosensory cortex. They descend towards the brainstem. They descend through the brainstem. They pass the fibers. They pass through the midbrain, pons, and eventually reach medulla oblongata. And at medulla oblongata, some of the fibers they cross over to the opposite side like this and form lateral corticospinal tract. And some of the fibers, 10% of the fibers, they remain ipsilateral to form anterior corticospinal tract. So in pyramidal tract, we have lateral corticospinal tract and anterior corticospinal tract. The lateral corticospinal tract originates from the primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, supplementary motor cortex, and some of the fibers they arise from the somatosensory cortex. So as far as the origin is concerned, 30% of the fibers they originate from the primary motor cortex, 30 from the area 6, and remaining 40% from the somatosensory cortex. So this is the input for the lateral corticospinal tract. 30% from area 4, 30% from area 6, and 40% from area 312. And how do they descend? They descend through the corona radiata and internal capsule down towards the brainstem, and when they reach the medulla, they form a swelling known as the pyramid. And this is the site where most of the fibers, 90% of the fibers, they decussate. By decussation, we mean they cross over to the opposite side and they enter the lateral white column of the spinal cord as the lateral corticospinal tract. So 90% of the pyramidal tracts are lateral corticospinal tract which decussate at the level of medulla. The remaining 10% are the anterior corticospinal tract. So these fibers they will enter the lateral white column of the spinal cord. That is why they are called lateral corticospinal tract. And the final destination is the spinal cord. How do they terminate? They terminate at the spinal cord by synapsing with the internuncial neurons, also known as the interneurons. These interneurons are located in the intermediate gray matter of spinal cord. So most of the fibers they synapse with the interneurons in intermediate gray matter. Some of the fibers they synapse in the dorsal horn neurons, and the remaining fibers they synapse in the anterior horn cells of spinal cord. So these are the sites for termination. And what do these lateral corticospinal tracts do? They control the voluntary limb movements, especially the fine skilled movements of hands. This is the primary function of lateral corticospinal tract, control of voluntary limb movements, especially fine skilled movements of hands. So if we compare the lateral corticospinal tract with the counterpart anterior corticospinal tract, also known as the ventral corticospinal tract, the source of origin is the same. The input remains the same. 30% from area 4, 30% from area 6, and 40% from area 312. And the course of the fibers is almost identical, but the distinguishing feature is that these fibers, the fibers of anterior corticospinal tract, these fibers they remain ipsilateral in medulla. So 10% of the fibers are anterior corticospinal tract, they remain ipsilateral and they will descend in the anterior white column. That is why we call these tracts as the anterior corticospinal tract. They enter the anterior white column, unlike the lateral white column of lateral corticospinal tract. So 90% fibers of lateral corticospinal tract they decussate, and the remaining 10% they remain ipsilateral. The origin is the same, and the site for termination is the anterior horn cells, the anterior motor neurons of the spinal cord. So as far as the functions are concerned, the functions are also very identical as that of lateral corticospinal tract. So these are the pyramidal tracts. Whenever we use the term pyramidal tract, we are referring to these two pathways, lateral and anterior corticospinal tract. So there are some important facts that you must remember. One of them is that Bett cells are unique large neurons, and they are found only in the area 4, that is primary motor cortex. These Bett cells are unusually very large in size. The diameter can be around 16 micrometer, and these are also known as the giant Bett cells, and they are only found in the primary motor cortex. Since the diameter of these fibers are very large, hence the conduction velocity you can see can be as great as 70 meters per second. So 34,000 of the Bett cell fibers are there in each corticospinal tract, and this comprises of 3% of the total fibers, and the total number of fibers is around 1 million. Out of this 1 million, 3% are of Bett cell fibers, and the remaining 97% are the small fibers with diameter of less than 4 micrometer. So you can see 60 micrometer diameter of the Bett cell fibers. Greater the diameter, greater the conduction velocity. The diameter of the nerve fiber is directly proportional to the conduction velocity. So there are giant pyramidal cells known as Bett cells. They are only found in the area 4, Brodmann's area 4, that is the primary motor cortex. You can see the diameter is greater, the conduction velocity is greater as well. So just to summarize the corticospinal tract, you can see the input comes from the primary motor cortex, area 4, 30% fibers from area 4, 30% fibers from area 6, and the remaining 40% fibers input is from area 312. The other name for area 312 is somatosensory cortex. So this is the input. All these fibers, they pass through the corona radiata and the internal capsule. They pass through the internal capsule and they descend towards the brainstem. Here you can see the midbrain. Then the fibers descend to the pons, and eventually they will enter the medulla oblongata. Now this is the site here where 90% of the fibers, 90% of the fibers, they will decussate. They will cross over to the opposite side. These 90% fibers, they will form the lateral corticospinal tract. They will enter the lateral white column, and the remaining 10% fibers are the ventral corticospinal tract or the anterior corticospinal tract. And these anterior corticospinal tract, they will enter the anterior white column of the spinal cord. So both anterior and lateral corticospinal pathways collectively are called as the pyramidal tracts. Why we call them as pyramidal tracts? Because at the level of medulla oblongata, these fibers, they form a collection, a bundle of nerve fibers which will give an appearance of a swelling just like a pyramid. So these are the descending motor pathways. Rest of the descending pathways are called as extrapyramidal pathways. So all the other descending pathways except lateral and ventral corticospinal tracts, they are labeled as extrapyramidal pathways. And here you can see another pathway known as cortico-rubrospinal pathway. Again, a descending pathway. In fact, this is combination of two pathways, cortico-rubral and corticospinal pathway. Here you can see cortico-rubral tract from the primary motor cortex towards the red nucleus, and the other is rubrospinal from the red nucleus toward the spinal cord. And the collective terminology for corticorubral and rubrospinal is corticorubrospinal pathway. And both are related to the red nucleus. This is the junction or the meeting point or the common point between the two pathways, corticorubral and rubrospinal red nucleus. One is anterior to the red nucleus, or you can say superior to the red nucleus, the other is inferior to the red nucleus. And this red nucleus is located in the tegmentum of the midbrain. And the pathway complete name, the collective terminology for both the corticorubral and rubrospinal pathway is corticorubrospinal tract. So the origin comes from two sides, direct fibers from the primary motor cortex through the corticorubral, and then we have branching fibers from corticospinal tract as well. So dual input for corticorubrospinal tract, input from two areas. Some are direct fibers from the primary motor cortex through the corticorubral pathway, and some fibers are branching fibers from the corticospinal pathway. And these pathway will descend through the red nucleus, and this red nucleus is located in the midbrain in the magnocellular portion. And this red nucleus, it also contains bed cells like cells. So we have just mentioned that within the primary motor cortex there are large pyramidal cells, giant cells called bed cells, and cells similar to these bed cells are also present in the magnocellular portion of the red nucleus as well. So these neurons, they will give rise to rubrospinal tract, and then they will decussate at the level of lower brainstem, and they will pass as the corticospinal tract into the lateral column of spinal cord. So this is the course for the cortico-rubrospinal pathway, and the site of termination is the same as we have mentioned in case of corticospinal tract. Some of the fibers, they terminate in the interneurons of the intermediate gray area, and other fibers, they synapse directly on the anterior motor neurons, the anterior horn cells. So they synapse on the same sites of corticospinal pathway. Some fibers at the intermediate area of gray matter with the help of interneurons, and other fibers, they synapse on the anterior horn cells, the anterior motor neurons. And these are the functions of cortico-rubrospinal pathway. You can see it controls discrete movements. Then there is facilitatory influence on the flexor muscle tone and inhibitory influence on the extensor muscle. So these pathways, they stimulate or facilitate the flexors and inhibit the extensors. The extensors are the anti-gravity muscles. So reciprocal effect on the flexors and extensors. Stimulatory effect or facilitatory effect on the flexors, and inhibitory effect on the extensors or the anti-gravity muscles. So we have discussed the pyramidal pathways, the anterior corticospinal tract, and the lateral corticospinal tract. And then we have discussed this cortico-rubrospinal tract. In fact, this cortico-rubrospinal tract, this is an indirect pathway through which the cerebral cortex and the cerebellum can influence the activities of the spinal cord. So the facts that you must remember is that the red nucleus is the meeting point, and this red nucleus is located at the level of superior colliculus in the midbrain. And another feature of this red nucleus is that it has close connections with the cerebellum as well. So here comes the role of cerebellum as well. So not only it has fibers connecting with the cerebrum, but there are connections with the cerebellum as well. So this pathways is not only responsible for the control of movements with the help of cerebral regulation, but also with the help of cerebellum. Another thing that you must remember is that corticospinal tract and ribnospinal tract collectively are sometimes known as the lateral motor system of the spinal cord. So another name for these tracts is lateral motor system of spinal cord. So if a question comes like this, that explain the lateral motor system of spinal cord, so you should not get confused. This is the same corticospinal and rubrospinal tracts. The medial motor system of spinal cord is the other opposite one, the vestibulo-reticulospinal tract, which we will discuss later. So now we will move on to the extrapyramidal pathways. All the descending pathways except the pyramidal pathways, that is except lateral corticospinal and anterior corticospinal pathway, rest of the descending pathways are known as the extrapyramidal pathways, and one of them is the reticulospinal pathway. So we will trace out the reticulospinal tract now. Why they are called as reticulospinal tract? Because the source of origin is the reticular formation in the brainstem. And what is reticular formation? Reticular formation is the group of nuclei in the brainstem, and this group includes nucleus or nuclei of pons, the pontine reticular nuclei. Here you can see on each side they are located at the level of pons. Then there are reticular nuclei at the level of medulla, hence known as medullary reticular nuclei. So collective terminology for these pontine and medullary reticular nuclei in the brainstem is reticular formation. Since the source of origin is this reticular formation, the tract is known as reticulospinal tract. The origin is from the brainstem, the reticular nuclei, and then they descend down towards the spinal cord. So reticular formation is the source of origin. What is reticular formation? All the nerve cells and the nerve fibers that are scattered throughout the brainstem. The three components of the brainstem: mesencephalon or the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. So from pons, the pontine reticulospinal pathway will originate, and from medulla we have medullary reticulonuclei, and this will give rise to the medullary reticulospinal tract. So these are extra pyramidal pathways, descending pathways, pontine and medullary reticulospinal pathways. So we will trace both the pathways. The other name for pontine reticulospinal tract is medial reticulospinal tract, and the source is obviously, as the name indicates, pontine reticulospinal tract originates from the pontine reticular nuclei. As we have discussed, there are reticular nuclei located at the level of pons, known as pontine reticular nucleus, and reticular nuclei at the level of medulla, known as medullary reticular nuclei. So this pontine reticular nucleus is the source of origin for these tracts, and then they will descend towards the anterior white column of the spinal cord. One thing to remember about pontine reticular nuclei is that they have a very high natural excitability. And why they remain excited? Because they have inputs from the vestibular nuclei and inputs from the deep cerebral nuclei. So they always receive excitatory signals from the vestibular nuclei and excitatory signals from the cerebellar nuclei. So the final destination is the same, anterior horn cells or the anterior motor neurons. As we have discussed that pontine reticular nuclei are excitatory in nature, that is the reason the functions are excitation of the muscles, excitation of the axial muscles, especially the anti-gravity muscles. Then comes the function on the muscle tone. Since it receives excitatory input from the vestibular and cerebellar nuclei, these tracts, they will increase the muscle tone. Not only they increase the muscle tone, they also facilitate the voluntary as well as reflex movements. And the counterpart is the medullary reticulospinal tract, another extrapyramidal descending pathway. The other name is lateral reticulospinal tract. So unlike pontine reticulospinal tract, the source of origin is from the medulla oblongata. So inside the medulla oblongata, we have medullary reticular nuclei. So medullary reticular nuclei are present near the midline. Remember, M for medulla, M for midline. They are located near the midline, and then they will descend in the lateral white column of spinal cord. That is the reason we call it as lateral reticulospinal tract, because unlike pontine reticulospinal tract, which enters the anterior white column, these tracts, they enter the lateral white column of the spinal cord. However, the final destination remains the same, the anterior motor neurons of the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord. As far as the functions are concerned, the medullary reticulospinal tract is almost opposite to that of pontine. You can see inhibitory effect on the muscle tone, inhibitory effect on the voluntary as well as reflex movements. So all the functions of pontine reticulospinal tract in case of medullary reticulospinal tract are reversed. Pontine is responsible for excitation of the anti-gravity muscles. This will inhibit the anti-gravity muscles. Similarly, pontine reticulospinal tract facilitates voluntary and reflex movement. Medullary will inhibit the voluntary and reflex movement. Similarly, this will decrease the muscle tone, unlike the pontine reticulospinal tract. Here you can see the cross section of the spinal cord. The outer portion of the spinal cord is the white matter, and inside the white matter, enclosed within the white matter, is the butterfly shaped gray matter region. Here you can see. These are the horns of the gray matter, the dorsal horn, and these are the ventral or the anterior horn. And this is the commissure which connects the gray matter region of the right side to the left side. And here you can see the site of termination of the reticulospinal tracts. We have just mentioned that the two reticulospinal tracts, medullary and pontine. Both the fibers, they terminate on the same anterior motor neurons. So remember that the site of termination is the same for both the medullary reticulospinal tract as well as pontine reticulospinal tract. Although pontine reticulospinal tract, they enter the anterior white column, and medullary reticulospinal tract, they enter the lateral white column. But both these pathways, they make the synapse for the final termination at the level of anterior horn cells, in which we have anterior motor neurons. So you must remember that these anterior motor neurons, they are located in the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord gray matter, and both the reticulospinal tract, medullary as well as pontine, they synapse at the same spot. You can see the final destination is the same, anterior motor neurons or the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord. One is coming from the anterior white column, the other is coming from the lateral white column, but termination is the same. So far we have discussed pyramidal pathways, the two pyramidal pathways, corticospinal, anterior corticospinal and lateral corticospinal. Then we discuss the accessory pathway known as cortico-rubrospinal pathway. Then there are extrapyramidal tracts, and reticulospinal tracts are one of them. In the extrapyramidal reticulospinal tracts, we have two subdivisions, medullary and pontine. For pontine, the source of origin is the pontine reticular nuclei, and for medullary, the source of origin is medullary reticular nuclei. Both are located within the brainstem. One group is located at the level of pons, the other group is located at the level of medulla, and the collective terminology is reticular formation. So in one line we can say reticular formation is the source of origin for the medullary as well as pontine reticulospinal tracts. Both are extrapyramidal. In this diagram you can also see another pathway known as vestibulospinal tract. Placed adjacently to the reticulospinal tract, another pathway, you can see lateral and medial vestibular spinal tract. Now this vestibulospinal tract again is an extrapyramidal tract. So let's start the role of vestibular nuclei. How do these vestibular nuclei, they play their part in the excitation of anti-gravity muscles? So we have already discussed that the pontine reticular nuclei, they have an excitatory effect on the extensor muscles of the body, that is on the anti-gravity muscles. The pontine reticular nuclei, they receive excitatory input from the vestibular nuclei as well. So these vestibular nuclei, they work in association with the pontine reticular nuclei, and the effect, the outcome is the same. So this will enhance the excitatory signal produced by the pontine reticular nuclei. So if there is no support from the vestibular nuclei, without this effect, the stimulatory effect of pontine reticular nuclei alone will not be that potent. So to summarize, pontine reticular nuclei, they have an excitatory effect on the antigravity muscles. Why? This effect is strong because they are associated with the vestibular nuclei as well. So excitation comes from not only pontine reticular nuclei but also from vestibular. So now we will trace the vestibulospinal pathway, another extrapyramidal tract, another motor pathway, and another descending pathway. So the source of origin is the vestibular nuclei, and these vestibular nuclei, they are present in the brainstem at the level of pons and medulla, just beneath the floor of the fourth ventricle. So this is the origin for the vestibulospinal tract. Another feature of these vestibular nuclei is that they also receive input from the inner ear as well as from the cerebellum. So these tracts, they receive input, one from the inner ear through the vestibular nerve, and they also receive input from the cerebellum as well. So inner ear, cerebellum, all are connected with the vestibular spinal pathway as well. And then the neurons of the vestibular nucleus will give rise to form the vestibulospinal tract. This will remain ipsilateral. Remember, this pathway is ipsilateral, and this will not cross at the level of medulla. It will pass ipsilaterally down through the medulla and eventually enter the anterior wide column of the spinal cord. So this is the course for the vestibulospinal tract, starting from the vestibular nuclei, then down towards the anterior wide column of the spinal cord. As far as the final destination is concerned, the fibers, the synapse at the internuncial neurons. The other name for internuncial neurons is interneurons. So they will synapse at the interneurons of the anterior gray column of spinal cord. So this is the final destination. As well as the functions are concerned, we have discussed that the vestibular nuclei, they receive input from the inner ear and cerebellum as well. So inner ear and cerebellum both are connected with the vestibulospinal pathway, and they have a facilitatory effect on the extensors and inhibitory effect on the flexors. So with this reciprocal facilitatory and inhibitory effect on flexors and extensors, these pathways, they maintain body posture and equilibrium. So in one line, the primary function of vestibulospinal tract is to control body posture and equilibrium. So this is all for today. If there are any questions, any query, you can text me. We still have 2 to 3 minutes. Yes, students, if you have any query, you can just text. We still have 2 to 3 minutes. All right. Meanwhile, we can summarize the pyramidal pathway or the corticospinal tract. Corticospinal tract is also known as the pyramidal tract. Why we call it as pyramidal? Because all these fibers, they form a bundle, a swelling at the level of medulla, which looks like a pyramid in shape. And corticospinal tract includes the lateral corticospinal pathway and the ventral or the anterior corticospinal tract. Since these are descending pathways, the source of origin comes from the cerebral cortex from the top. 30% of the input is from area 4, primary motor cortex. 30% from area 6, the premotor and supplementary motor cortex. And 40% input comes from the somatosensory area 312. As you can see, the fibers from each side, they will descend through the internal capsule down towards the brainstem. So these fibers, they will descend through the midbrain, through the pons, and eventually enter the medulla oblongata. Now this is the site for decussation. Remember, only 90% fibers decussate. That is 90% fibers, they cross over to the opposite side. And these fibers, they will enter the lateral white column of the spinal cord. They will form the lateral corticospinal tract. The remaining 10% of the fibers, they remain ipsilateral at the level of medulla oblongata. So they will not cross over to the opposite side, rather they will descend ipsilaterally and eventually enter the anterior white column of the spinal cord, and these fibers, they will form the ventral corticospinal tract. So all the pathways, all the descending pathways except the ventral and lateral corticospinal tracts are known as extrapyramidal pathway. And in extrapyramidal pathway, today we discuss the role of reticulospinal tract and the role of vestibulospinal tract. So that's all for today's session. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.